West, and I'm the artistic director of Musos Concerts in Vancouver. This is a very special edition of Take Note. And before we start our interview, I want to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting this conversation from the unceded stolen territory of the Musqueam Nation, upon whose land I am a settler, and we are grateful to be making music and doing our work on these traditional territories. Our guest today joins us from
Berlin, Germany.
Berlin, and we are joined by fantastic pianist and prize laureate of the 2018 Honens piano competition, Nicolas Namoradze. Nico, jó estét kívánok! Hogy vagy?
Jó estét, jó vagyok, köszönöm.
Do you have...
Nice to see you.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's been a year since I last saw you. I think it was at Banff about a year ago. So yes,
Yeah.
different times those were.
Very different times. Do you have a greeting for any listeners in Georgian?
Salam Shudobisa, that's good evening. It's quite late there already. It will be about 11 p.m. So
Wow.
Yes, I think yes, exactly on the other side of the world to where you are. Yeah, so yeah.
They can listen to the broadcast when they wake up.
Yes, indeed.
So tell us, during this remarkable historical period that we find ourselves in, I'm so done with adjectives for this pandemic. I can't find any good adjectives anymore. What has kept you busy during the pandemic?
Well, funnily enough, I've tried to make myself as busy as possible. I think partly because I simply want to feel like I've made the most of this time and it hasn't gone to waste, so to say. So before all this began, I had written precisely 0 pages of my doctoral dissertation. And last month I defended it. So yes, this entire process I could fit in these couple of months. And so that was a big project.
Now, just to let people know, Nico sent me his dissertation and he went from 0 to about 245. Is it, how many pages is it?
Took care of, so to say.
Wow.
75. 275. Yes, no, it was quite a tome, I must say. But yes, a thrilling experience to write it, I must say. So yes, and plus, of course, I've been practicing a lot. I powered through about 12.5 piano concerti, added them to my repertoire, and since then have been kind of also working on many, what I'd say, perhaps legacy projects, the kinds of things that you feel like at some point in your life you need to invest time in, those kinds of pieces that I had not yet learned but knew I wanted to have in my repertoire, even if I'm not planning on playing them within the next couple of seasons, like the Goldberg variations, the Hammerklavier, these kinds of things that I felt like, you know, unless I were to take a sabbatical at some point, in the next couple of years or in the middle of my career, I will not have this kind of period of quiet and calm, relatively speaking. I mean, I've been fortunate not to be on the front lines or anywhere near the front lines of this pandemic, and neither have my family or a close circle of friends, though a couple of them have caught it and gotten ill, but thankfully not in a particularly dangerous or difficult form. So I said, you know, I might as well use this time as a kind of sabbatical and learn the kinds of things that I usually don't have time for in the middle of a concert season. So this was really an opportunity to learn 3 late Schubert sonatas and just, you know, really set aside time for major projects. So yes, I've been trying to just accumulate as much of this music and assimilate it into my system, so that I can just count on it in the years to come.
So you learned 958, 959, and 960?
I've done 959 before, so I did 958, 960, the great G major sonata, which I adore. These were pieces that I always wanted to play, and I just said, okay, I'll just set aside the time to do this now. It's a very different kind of work when one doesn't have concerts immediately on the horizon. Now I already do. I'm already starting performing and touring next month. So even though I can set aside maybe an hour or 2 hours a day for, new pieces, this kind of exploratory work, I can never delve into them with all my concentration as I would if I were not preparing for a particular event, because now I have to keep up pieces that I'm performing soon. So there's really nothing like the feeling of setting aside the whole day to just practice a new piece. Just take a Schubert's nut and just work on nothing else. And I must say the last time I felt that was many, many years ago, before I was really performing actively, and still as a child and as a teenager, just in the summers, I would just take pieces and work through them at my own pace and just devour this music without me having a particular goal. Interestingly enough, I don't necessarily feel particularly motivated by a certain event that I have to play something at. Of course, it does motivate one, but I sometimes say if I could get paid to just practice, I'd be perfectly happy with that. I mean, of course, I adore the concert experience and it's central to my life, but I just love to sit at home and practice as well. I just love spending, each day with this incredible art. So I've been just having a good time doing that.
And it is an incredible art form to spend time with. And
Well, it is.
I think you mentioned
Some of the greatest art ever written, really. So
it is the greatest art ever written. You mentioned you're going to be going on tour soon. So has concert life in Europe sort of returned a little bit to normal?
yes, so things have returned more to normal here than they have, I'd say, in North America, or at least in the States, where all my concerts have been postponed. So there's nothing happening for the rest of the year in the States or in Canada. I had many concerts planned in Canada this fall. I was so looking forward to, with several orchestras that I couldn't wait to collaborate with. Unfortunately, that's all been pushed ahead. But yes, I have performances already here in Europe. I guess if you keep an eye on the news, you'll see that socially distanced concerts are coming back into kind of our daily routine. We see some festival putting on some kind of show pretty much every day these days in Europe, and with different kinds of accommodations, either spreading the seats out more or just restricting attendance, mandating face masks and so forth. So yes, Europe is pretty much back to a kind of concert season. I mean, many important series have been cancelled, and orchestras, of course, are bearing the brunt of this crisis more than chamber series and recital series. So we'll see. And opera, of course. I mean, singing is a tough one, and of course, choral music is hard to manage during this time. But yes, I'm getting back to performing next month, and yeah, looking forward to it.
And tell us, we were meant to meet at Honens, and you had quite the week at competition, and you had hurt yourself backstage right before playing, and then we weren't able to meet. We met in Banff a year later. But how has your life changed since Honens? How did becoming the prize laureate, how did that change your career? The Honens organization really is a family, and they really take care of people. And I'm just wondering, how has your experience changed since that 2 weeks in Calgary?
Well, it's made all the difference, really. I mean, it's kickstarted my international career. I don't think even kickstarted is the right word. It launched, essentially. As you might have read, I did take quite some time off before Honens to just work on myself, so to speak. I wasn't performing actively. I was not on the competition circuit. I decided to take several years off to build my repertoire, find myself as an artist. So it was not that I had been, actively performing at the time of the competition and it just added a bit of fuel to a fire that was already burning. I really kind of went out, I came out of a period of retreat, and Honens just kind of the way I opened the door back into the world of active performing.
Mhm.
And I've said this a couple of times, but I really don't exaggerate that. I think if there were any one competition I could have chosen to have won, it would have been Honens, because the amount of attention and care they give the prize laureate over the course of the 3-year artist development program, and the opportunities it gives, whether it's in the concert opportunities, the recital opportunities, the tours, the recordings, which are really invaluable, the press opportunities, the way in which relationships are established with impresarios around the globe, with the concert presenters, the management I've had. This has just been everything I could ask for. So I'm just, really indebted to this institution and everything that it's done for my life as a musician.
And as that is my hometown, we have always enjoyed having this spur of amazing international pianism in our hometown for 2 weeks, being able to hear this wonderful music and meeting the performers and having this injection of culture really heavily for 2 weeks, and then the collaborations with the BAM Center. It's pretty magical little space.
It really is, and I've heard many people say that Honens, even the competition, feels like a festival more than anything, given the amount of chamber music that one does, the wonderful musicians one collaborates with, and just very collegial.
Mm-hmm.
And warm atmosphere that we felt throughout the process. So yes, not only I would have remembered it as a positive experience throughout.
Now, this is very interesting that you had taken a bit of time off from competitions to examine your role as an artist. What advice would you give young pianists or any instrumentalists preparing for a major competition?
Well, there's a lot of advice out there already, which I'm sure one knows, like, don't feel like one shouldn't feel like one is connected. It's a concert, one is connecting with the audience, of course, and another kind of point that one would add to that is one shouldn't feel like one is judging oneself too much in those circumstances, and one's success at the competition shouldn't be a reflection of one's self-worth as a musician at all, because I feel that that can add an unnecessary amount of pressure. It is already in many ways a very bizarre situation to be in when one is performing yet competing at the same time. It's not a sport, yet one has to compete, and everyone gets a point score, and it's a strange combination. However, I think one thing that really helped me, that I would advise anyone do before going to a competition, is to run through the competition in their minds as much as they can. Imagine oneself performing that first round or that second round if one is fortunate enough for the finals. Just do that. I mean, don't daydream too much. Don't imagine the award ceremony when one, wins the big prize. I mean, keep a cool head, but yeah. So don't take it too far, and don't imagine the concerts afterwards that one gets as a result. So keep one's thoughts in check, because then the potential lack of success might feel more devastating, and we need to mitigate any feeling of devastation. But yes, I think if one feels like one's done this already, then it doesn't feel so daunting. Check out the concert hall or the venue you'll be playing in. Memorize what it looks like. Imagine oneself playing in that space. And if you repeat that experience in your head, then when you actually do it, it feels like you've done it already. It doesn't feel like, good grief, I've never been here. I've never seen these people. I don't know this piano, all that. Just imagine doing well in those circumstances. And one is really training one's mind to really do that. There's one very interesting fact about our brains that I find so fascinating and in many ways empowering is that our brains are not able to distinguish between something we actually do and something we imagine very vividly. One example, I mean, a very palpable manifestation of this is that if I am still in bed, I've just woken up and my muscles haven't yet been warmed up, I'm still kind of feeling like a jellyfish in bed. But I imagine myself playing, I can feel my muscles getting sore because my muscles think I'm playing the piano without having warmed up. So I really, I can tell that my nerves are getting activated because I'm imagining an action. My body kind of thinks I'm actually doing it. So if one imagines playing well in those circumstances, one is actually conditioning one's kind of nervous system and muscles to actually do that. So mental practice is my big thing. I'm really into it, and it's been a big part of my own work. And so I guess that would be my piece of advice. Perhaps not the usual advice one gets. That try to do the brain work.
I think that's wonderful advice.
Before going.
If you're traveling a lot, you might not have access to a piano all the time, so you have to mentally practice and do score practice. If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Anything from working on one's interpretative choices at the instrument or away from the instrument, that is a mental process, of course, but even just working out physical actions, imagining a certain nasty jump,
Mm-hmm.
and imagining nailing a nasty jump, can wire into one's brain those motions successfully. And I know even runners, you'd think what's so complicated about running in a straight line, but even runners mentally practice those motions. So why shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Let's circle back to this dissertation that went from 0 to 275 in rapid speed. You chose to discuss the composer George Ligeti. Is this a Hungarian connection? Why did you pick him?
Well, yes, there's the Hungarian connection. I did grow up in Hungary, and I absorbed new music, and in particular new Hungarian music, from a very early age. And Ligeti's etudes were my war horses. As a young teenager, I was learning them at the age of 13, 14, 15 and playing them, and they were always a big part of my profile as a performer, as a pianist. So this was music that was always very close to my heart, and I grew up speaking that language. So yes, it was quite natural for me to delve into this music for my dissertation.
And if you were going to give our audience something to listen for, let's say in the first etude, what should they listen for? What is peculiar or particular or wonderful about the first etude of Ligeti that an audience member could listen for and enjoy or appreciate?
Well, the first etude is great fun to listen to. It's called Désordre, so disorder. And what happens is the hands start playing in a synchronized manner. They play a pattern that is rhythmically coordinated, but then they go out of sync. And this is an example of what is sometimes called the butterfly effect. It's influenced by chaos theory in mathematics, where, well, proverbially, I mean, the flapping of the wings of a butterfly in one place could cause a hurricane a long way away because of a chain of events that it provokes. So in the case of Ligeti's first etude, a small rhythmic misalignment causes a spiraling into such disorder and chaos. And it's very entertaining. One is on the edge of one's seat, just hoping that things come back together again, and they keep spiraling out of control. The hands move further and further apart from each other in terms of coordination, and they also get faster at the same time. And it's quite an extraordinary feat for the performer, and really one of the most exciting pieces of music to listen to. So I'd advise a listener to try to keep track of these two patterns and see how they interact with each other, and try to track this constantly changing relationship between the two of them.
That's wonderful. I'll have to listen to those again as well. And speaking of contemporary Hungarian music, although you're of Georgian descent, you did grow up in Hungary. So um, tell us more about your hat as a composer, because I remember at Honens, I believe you played a few of your own etudes. Um, Tell us more about your life as a composer. When did you start composing? And tell us about the process you go through when you compose.
Interestingly enough, I began scribbling. I began putting pen to paper as soon as I started learning the piano, studying the piano. I was 7 years old, so relatively late, in fact. But they seemed such a natural combination. It just seemed so natural that learning to perform meant learning to write and learning how music is put together. I just felt like whoever plays must be able to write and vice versa. And then that fell to the wayside as a teenager because I was attending both the pre-college of the Liszt University, the Liszt Academy in Budapest, as well as an international British school full-time. I could not wear so many hats. At the same time, I took my academics very seriously. So I did not have time for composing. I could barely manage everything as it was. So it was only, in fact, when I got to Juilliard for my master's, where there was this incredible atmosphere of thinking outside the box, of moving beyond one's comfort zone, of interdisciplinary collaboration, that this inspiration to write again took hold of me. I started studying composition there, as well as studying electronic music and objects. And this is in my 20s then. As soon as I started writing, even the very first piece that I wrote was already in what is still my style. So I think that even though I stopped writing actively in the years between my early years and my 20s when I began composing again, I had always been studying composition still, as a pianist as well, learning the pieces I was playing, thinking about them, understanding how they are put together, which was an important part of my process as a performer, really was a kind of composition lesson. And for example, Ligeti's voice can be still very strongly felt in my style because he really influenced my conception of what it meant to write music today and what kind of experiences a composer might want to put the listener through. So I don't feel like I lost time by not writing for many years because I still feel like I probably would have ended up in more or less the same place I am now in terms of my compositional style.
Are you writing something right now?
I am about to start right now. I have been for the past couple of months because I said that I'll stick to writing words. I decided that I'll keep the writing activities concentrated in one direction in order to get through this in time. And otherwise I was spending my non-writing time with other activities such as being at the piano, reading a lot, and yes, trying to make the most of this time as well as I could.
And who have been some of your mentors for composing?
Well, I guess the most important teacher figure has been John Corleano,
Okay.
who I studied with in New York, and really not only changed my understanding and conception of writing, but also simply my understanding of any piece I perform. His approach was fascinating because he encouraged me against starting with an idea, a musical idea, and then adding something onto it, and then further and further and further on. He compared it to a sculptor that will begin by crafting first a fingernail, then the rest of the finger, then the rest of the hand, working down the arm, before actually creating the broad outline, the structure of the shape, before delving into detail. Or a sculptor or an architect working on small details before planning out what the whole building looks like. So he suggested actually think of the experience you want to put the listener through. what kind of mood do you want to begin with? What kind of atmosphere? What is the narrative arc of the piece? What is the shape? Plan out the architecture and then fill it in with notes. It's a really interesting way of thinking about it, and it really encouraged me to see the big picture. And he himself will write a piece just as a structure, as an experience, as a kind of musical conceptual construction before even having any specific musical material to fill it with.
Wow.
And I found it's a very powerful way of ensuring a kind of structural coherence. And yes, something that's really influenced the way I see music in general.
It's kind of like build the wooden frame of the house before you buy the drapes and the furniture to decorate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a kind of zoomed out thinking, a bird's eye view of the piece before looking at the details. And that's not to say that one doesn't put a lot of attention and care into the melodic material. I mean, I'd say Corleone is one of the most talented melodists and has written some of the most extraordinary melodies. Just, even in something like The Red Violin, and one thinks of, the main theme for the film and the subsequent concert pieces that is really just so ravishing and inspired. But even that he wrote with a kind of bird's eye view, this large scale process that really informed the way he crafts dramatic narratives. So this was really a big influence on me, and something that I think about for small pieces as well as large ones. No matter how long the piece may be, this kind of approach really helps create a solid foundation for any work on which to build any kind of structure.
So young composers, there's your tip of the day. Look at the architecture and the big picture first.
Yes, yes.
We're going to move on to
courtesy of Mr. Corleone.
Yes, credits to Corleone. We're going to move on to our rapid fire round where we ask really quick questions and we just want the first answer that comes to your head. This is more of a fun portion where audience gets to know you a little bit. If you're ready, what are 3 albums you would take to a desert island?
So the only trouble with our rapid fire round is that we've got a bit of a lag, so I suspect the audience hears a bit of a pause before I answer, but I'm doing my best to intervene as soon as I can to cancel out the lag. So 3 albums on a desert island. Oh, there are too many to pick from. I think as it's Beethoven year, and unfortunately Beethoven has gotten a bit of a rough deal because all his concerts got canceled, I'll at least pick some Beethoven. Can I pick box sets, cycles at least? They count as a recording. 3 cycles. Yeah, I'd say the string quartets with the Bush Quartet, always a kind of a landmark, a musical landmark. I'd say the piano sonatas with Schnabel.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd say the piano concertos with the recording I grew up listening to. It's with Schiff and Haitink. Andras Schiff, it's just the most wonderful recording. So I picked those 3 sets in honor of Mr. Beethoven for this year.
Well, and I don't know if our audience can see, but behind me is a poster from WQXR, New York.
Right. Yeah.
Where we
Obey. Yes,
Beethoven. There we go. Our next rapid fire question is, what is your favorite type of cuisine?
Oh, well, I love so many cuisines around the world, but I'll just have to say because of kind of an emotional attachment, with a complete lack of any national pride. I'm not big on nationalism, so to say. I'd say Georgian simply because it's close to my heart. And when I was back in Georgia last year, I was quite astonished at what young Georgians are doing with the culinary tradition. I was really taken aback and so impressed. So yes, I'll just say Georgian.
I would love to try Georgian food one day. Are you reading any novels currently, or have you recently read a novel that you love?
I'm currently reading J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace, which is quite fascinating. And yes, I've been reading a lot. I'm a big Murakami fan, and I've been kind of diving through many of his novels, and also recently read a really interesting novel by a young Georgian author. I was reminded by the Georgian Cuisine. She actually wrote it in German originally, but it's been translated into English and Georgian, called The Eighth Life. It's something like a war and peace for the 20th century, and a fascinating account of the century seen through the lens of a Georgian family. And it was an interesting way for me to get even more familiar with the country I was born in but never lived in. So it was a special experience for me.
That is very special. We'll have to check out some of these book recommendations. If you could travel back in time to meet any composer or hear them play, who would it be and why?
I guess it would have to be Bach. Kind of an obvious answer, but at the same time, there are so many composers I'd have loved to have met, but I think we can more or less simulate what their playing might have been like. Even Liszt, and we dream of the apocryphal Liszt recording, you know, that might be somewhere. But knowing the way his students played, I think is a pretty good kind of guide as to how he might have played. And it's interesting, I've gotten used to finding similarities between A teachers and their students playing. And I can, recently I was listening to Mieczysław Muntz, a teacher of my teacher, Emmanuel Axe, and I could hear actually my teachers playing in his teachers playing a lot, and I was surprised at the extent to which I felt that. So, but Bach is so far away, and we have so many questions as to how he might have played his music, or even Mozart or Beethoven. And we have such a robust debate today about how this music might have been played that I think it would be invaluable to really go as far back in time as we can.
I would agree.
Of repertoire that we play actively today and really have an idea how that music was played.
That would be a great suggestion. Are there any pianists from the past that you would like to travel back and hear, particularly pianists?
Particularly pianists. Well, to be very piano-centric, I think one composer we perhaps don't know that much about in terms of how they played compared to their once contemporary Liszt would have been Chopin. I think a considerably more mysterious pianist in terms of our understanding of how he might have played. And though I'm not a huge Chopinist, I adore the music, but it's not something that's so central to my repertoire, especially compared to my colleagues who devour Chopin. I would still be really fascinated to hear him play. That would be, I think, quite enlightening and astonishing.
I'm part Polish, so he would be at the top of my list.
I see. Definitely.
And our final question is, if you could play a concerto with any non-living conductor, who would it be and which orchestra?
Well, you know, it would be easy to say someone really out of the past, like Furtwängler or something like this. But interestingly, a composer I always dreamed to collaborate with and perform with, whom I will no longer be able to perform with, is Marius Jansons.
Oh, yeah.
Always felt like just the most extraordinary musical personality, a personality that just oozed out of every small motion, and just communicated in such an immediate way. I'm currently working on the fourth concerto, which I'm playing next month. Beethoven's fourth, that is, of course, Beethoven here. And I always think to myself that, oh, how I'd have loved to have played this with him. So maybe with, I don't know, I'm in Berlin, so let's say Berlin, Phil. Hometown. Right. Yes.
It is so wonderful to catch up with my friend Nicolas Namoradze. It's been
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to see you.
It's our pleasure. And it's been a year since we were enjoying some social time with mutual friends at the Bab Center, and hearing you play with our friends, the Rolston Quartet, who will be our guests on Sunday.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, very excited. And we want to thank Nico for being our guests. And we would like to thank our sponsors, 2X Education and Tom Lee Music. They are our exclusive Steinway and Yamaha dealers. And we're just grateful to have Nico join us today for this wonderful conversation. And where are you next performing? And will it be live streamed?
Well, yes, actually, I will be performing with the London Philharmonic next month, and it will be broadcast and streamed and all that, but more details to follow soon. So
Please let
we'll
us know and we'll let the
have
audience know about
information.
those details.
Yes, I will make sure to let everyone know about this. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned and take note. This has been Jennifer West with MuseWest Concerts, and I was joined by Nicolas Namoradze from Berlin. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening, Nicolas.
You too. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.